The Iranian army has just admitted that it is in a state of war under Trump's brutal military siege, and it acknowledges that the American military pressure weighs on the regime and keeps Iran operating under strain, fear, and surveillance. The statement gained traction today, April 28, 2026, when a spokesperson for the Iranian army said that the nation is still living in a state of war and maintains constant vigilance. This is not an ordinary behind-the-scenes remark, it's a military message. Tehran is saying that its forces remain on alert, its defenses are still mobilized, and the regime is still operating as if the conflict could resume at any moment. I'll tell you all about that in a moment, but right now you'll want to subscribe to the channel to stay well informed with real-time information at the highest journalistic quality ever seen with the credibility standard of ALVs. The crisis, it now needs to be read from a military perspective. While Washington evaluates an Iranian proposal to halt the war, the Iranian army itself admits that the environment is still one of combat. This shows that Trump is not negotiating with an adversary in a comfortable position. He is negotiating with a regime pressured by surveillance, the threat of new attacks, wear and tear on its defenses, and fear of losing even more ability to respond. The main point is that Tehran is trying to separate negotiations from the military reality. Iran wants to end the war first, reorganize its forces, and only then discuss the nuclear program. Trump did not accept that sequence. According to Reuters, the president was dissatisfied with the Iranian proposal because it left the nuclear issue for a later stage. For Washington, that's exactly the issue that can't be pushed aside. If the regime remains in a state of war, military pressure should not be lifted before concrete guarantees are given. That's the core of their strategy. It's not just a dispute at sea, it's about keeping Iran under pressure in terms of command, defense, and mobilization. When an army admits to being in a state of war, it also admits that it needs to protect bases, radars, launchers, command centers, depots, borders, and strategic facilities. Every day in this state of alert consumes resources, wears down troops, increases the risk of mistakes, and prevents the regime from returning to normal. The meeting of Gulf leaders in Saudi Arabia reinforces this scenario. Mohammed bin Salman presided over a meeting of the Gulf Cooperation Council in Jeddah to discuss a response to the Iranian attacks. Reuters reported that the meeting aimed to formulate a joint response after months of missile and drone attacks against the region's essential infrastructure. This shows that the Iranian threat has become a collective defense issue involving early warning, air defense, intelligence, and coordination. For Trump, this regional mobilization helps to maintain the pressure. If the Gulf nations are gathered to discuss security and military response, Iran appears as the force that destabilizes the region. And if Tehran appears as the source of the risk, Washington gains room to defend a tougher stance. The logic is simple. There is no reason to ease the pressure while the regime keeps its apparatus on a war footing and while its recent attacks force its neighbors to strengthen their defenses. The missile and drone attacks are a central part of this scenario. They show that the conflict is not just about rhetoric. Missiles depend on command, launch platforms, and intelligence. Drones depend on operation centers, routes, depots, and train teams. When these tools become part of the crisis, the response also needs to be military. That's why the Gulf is discussing coordination. That's why Trump doesn't consider the Iranian proposal sufficient. The threat remains operational. American pressure also appears in the way Trump handles the Iranian proposal. Instead of accepting a quick pause, he demands that the nuclear issue be included from the very beginning. This is important because the nuclear program is the strategic center of the conflict. For the United States, there's no point in stopping the attacks for a few days if Iran keeps its ability to advance a project that threatens to change the military balance in the region intact. Trump wants to prevent Tehran from using the ceasefire as recovery time. Reuters reported that the attacks decreased after the ceasefire on April 8, but Gulf capitals remain on alert for a possible resumption of the conflict. This detail is essential. Decreasing attacks doesn't mean ending the war. It just means slowing the pace. The forces remain in position, The defense systems stay alert, intelligence keeps monitoring movements, and governments continue preparing for the worst-case scenario. Trump's military pressure works exactly in that space between a ceasefire and open war. He keeps Iran under pressure without allowing the regime to breathe as if nothing were happening. Tehran needs to calculate every move, protect its structures, avoid further escalation, seek external support, and convince Washington to accept a proposal that doesn't resolve the nuclear issue right from the start. For Trump, this is a sign that he has the advantage. The opponent is asking for a way out while still living under military alert. The trip of Foreign Minister Abbas Araq through Islamabad, Oman, and Russia also shows this search for breathing room. Iran is looking for mediators, allies, and political support because it knows it can't get out from under the pressure on its own. But the diplomatic moves don't erase the military situation. The army remains on alert, the Gulf is organizing, and Washington maintains its nuclear demands. And Israel remains involved on parallel fronts, while Hezbollah and Israeli forces continue exchanging attacks despite the ceasefire announced on April 17. This increases the risk. The crisis is not concentrated on a single front. There is pressure on Iran, tension in the Gulf, movement of regional allies, and fighting involving Hezbollah in Lebanon. For any military command, this means strain. The more open fronts there are, the harder it is to coordinate defense, protect facilities, and keep troops ready. It's in this environment that the expression state of war gains significance. No noticiário que circula, some try to present the Iranian proposal as a sign of openness, but in military circles the interpretation is different. A proposal made while the army acknowledges it is on war alert seems less like a show of strength and more like an attempt to buy time. Iran wants to reduce the pressure, reorganize its defenses, and avoid having the nuclear issue immediately become the main topic on the table. Donald Trump realizes this and keeps the pressure on. The Gulf meeting also puts pressure on Tehran because it turns regional defense into a collective issue. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain took part in the meeting, while Oman's representation was described as uncertain in the information released. Even with internal differences, these nations were forced to discuss a common threat. For Iran, this is dangerous. A more coordinated region makes attacks more difficult. It reduces surprise and increases the cost of any new action with missiles or drones. Anwar Gargashi, a United Arab Emirates official, criticized the political and military response of the Gulf Cooperation Council, calling the bloc's actions weak. This criticism does not reduce the pressure on Iran. On the contrary, it reveals a demand for more coordination, more firmness, and greater responsiveness. When regional leaders start demanding military strength, the room for Tehran to intimidate its neighbors shrinks. The situation, therefore, is one of Iranian military strain. The regime still talks about war. Its forces remain on alert. Its allies remain involved on parallel fronts. Its neighbors are discussing a joint response. And the United States refuses to ease pressure without putting the nuclear issue at the center. In the end, the admission by the Iranian army confirms the main point. The regime remains stuck in a combat mindset. By admitting a state of war, Tehran acknowledges that American military pressure weighs on the regime and that Trump keeps Iran operating under strain, fear, and vigilance. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the ALVS community. Obviously.